Welcome to another presentation from the SNHU History Department. I'm Learning Community Facilitator Natalie Sweet, and today we are discussing how to identify scholarly sources. In your history class, you may have been asked to find sources for a discussion board post, an essay, or a research paper. However, you should be mindful of the sources that you select. The internet has made information as easy to access as the click of a mouse. However, all sources are not created equal. How do you tell a scholarly source from a questionable source? Asking a few questions can help solve this problem. When you first look at a source, look at the publisher. Many scholarly journal articles and books are tied to university presses or to other reputable institutions. These publishers print authors who are considered to be experts in their fields. The SNHU Shapiro Library's online databases are a great place to begin searching for journal articles or for electronic books that are printed by such publishers. Avoid random blogs and websites. Consider whether a website ends in .com, .net, .org, .edu, or .gov. While anyone can register a website with any one of these endings, a .edu or .gov website may indicate that a source is worth exploring further, as it may be tied to institutional or government data. A .com or .net may indicate that you want to stay away from a source, because you should also consider whether or not a source is peer-reviewed. Peer review means that another scholar has reviewed an article or a book to double-check the material. In addition to working with you here at SNHU, I'm also a book review editor of a scholarly journal. The editor of the publication sends out all journal articles to scholars in our fields to make certain that our author's arguments do not contain critical errors. I review the written work of book reviewers to make certain that their reviews meet our publication standards. As such, we are a peer-reviewed journal. How can you tell if a source is peer-reviewed? Click on the publisher's information within the database you search, or do a quick search on Google to see if the publication is peer-reviewed. Because random websites like Wikipedia are not peer-reviewed and the authors are unknown, these are not scholarly sources, and they should be avoided. Speaking of authors, a third step that you should take is to look at the background of your author. Why is this important? Understanding your author's background can tell you whether or not he or she is qualified to write about the topic. For example, let's say that you are searching for an article on the lives of women in colonial America. You find the author Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. You discover that she works at Harvard University. That's a reputable institution. You find that she has a doctorate in history from the University of New Hampshire, and that she has written several well-respected and award-winning articles and books on the history of women, particularly of women in colonial New England. This information indicates that she would be a good source for your project. Once you have asked these questions about your source, you can use the CRAAP method, developed by the Merriam Library at California State University and used by libraries around the world, to further determine if the information contained within your source contains good information. Consider the currency of the source. In other words, how up to date is the information? Was the article written in the 1970s? While there might be good information contained within this article, it's also worth considering that scholars writing later on may have advanced or disproved the information contained within the 1970s article. After considering the currency of the source, think about its relevance. How useful will the source be to your project? For example, let's say that you are still writing that paper on colonial women. You decide that you want to focus on women in colonial New England. You find an interesting source on the lives of women in New England throughout American history, but its primary focus is on the 19th century. Although women in that time period may have shared some similarities, the project and the source do not fit neatly with one another. You likely need to look for another source. The next step in the CRAAP test is to look at the authority of the piece. This ties to whether or not the source is scholarly, and if you followed my previous advice, you are likely solid on this piece of the test. One other point that you may want to consider, however, is whether or not the author has any biases. Don't think of bias as necessarily a negative thing. Each and every person has biases because we have all lived through experiences that affect the way we view the world around us. Consider whether anything in the author's background may influence the conclusions that he or she reaches in the source that you review. The next day is for accuracy. Where does the information found within the source come from? Check your source's primary source and secondary source material. Does the author use plentiful primary sources? Are the secondary sources that are cited from some other reputable source? Finally, consider the purpose of the source. Why was the information in the source created? Who was its intended audience? This can help you think further about bias, and it can also help you think about whether or not the source is appropriate for a university-level assignment. Keep these pointers in mind and you will select good sources for use in your history class. If you have any questions after watching this presentation, visit the SNHU Connect Exploring History Learning community. There you can join in discussion with your fellow classmates and access other resources related to your history classes. Until then, I'm Learning Community Facilitator Natalie Sweet, and thank you for listening.